We are looking at trying to sum up everything that we've talked about this afternoon. I know we've talked about there's a lot of detail, a lot of data, and there's the previous presentations really drill down into the details of the DFR and the plant report and that kind of thing. We're going to try and show just sort of the overall workflow, and this is where I go to what's on the tables, the 11 by 17 spread flow chart, and we'll be able to touch on that, and then we'll get into some things with DocExpress as well. Like Renee said, I'm going to focus on the DOT side of things, and really probably all of our presentations to focus mostly on, as a DOT as the owner. But I think anything with a county or city or consultant being used, it's just substituting the proper entity in for DOT. So when you see that on the flow chart, I think whatever would be appropriate for your area would be just substitute that in. And here's the flow chart. I know it's hard to read. We got them there for you to be able to look at. I'm going to break it down into some pieces to be able to talk to a little more specific. We'll start at the top here. Again, we're having this vision of a day in the life of HMA paving and a day in the life of an inspector, both from the owner agency side and from the contractor side. So you're going to have just starting off with your day of paving. Each side is going to have their own piece that they're doing. The CPI is going to be going through, filling out the plant report, some of the things that we just heard about early on in their presentation. DOT's got things that they're collecting as well, the hot box information, and we're using the DFR to be able to transfer information. Then we finish the day of paving. And I know there's a lot of things that go into the whole day of paving. We've talked about a lot of that through the morning session, through what we talked about in the previous two presentations. I'm not trying to touch every piece of it, but I'm trying to give you that overall view. So I'm not looking to, I realize there's steps here that I'm not necessarily addressing. But the main thing here is as you look through how this flows, the paving's done, and then the DOT inspector determines the core information. Runs that program that's within the DFR to be able to determine where the cores are to be ran, or to be cut, I should say. At that end of the day paving, the inspector's got the in station, the core locations now, all the information that they've collected throughout the day with your hot boxes and mat temperatures and everything. So that's what gets emailed to the CPI, which is what's that step shown there. And the CPI then is able to import that into the plant report. While they're doing that with the plant report, then we're also going out and cutting the cores, getting that information to then where we can run the cores at the lab and be able to enter that information into the plant report. Once this contractor CPI is able to get that into the plant report, we want to have that submitted to DocExpress. And that's going to go into a working drawer, and that is the entire spreadsheet. And from that, then our people in materials that are running the hot box, the one of the 3 samples that were taken, are then able to verify what the test results were from the contractor CPI side. The process will remain the same then, and that's the far right, where the DOT materials or whoever is running that sample will then use the program that emails to the CPI what the DOT test results are. Once the contractor CPI gets those test results, then they will enter that into the plant report and they will submit a second version to DocExpress. It'll be in the working drawer. It'll be something that'll tie into the previous submittal. It won't be a separate line entry. It will be onto the same, or the previous submittal, I want to say. However, there will be a log there that'll be able to document that there was a previous version and now a new version. Once that is into DocExpress, then it's into the DOT or the agency side to where we need to verify that everything that we're seeing in the plant report is accurate. That's where our field inspector will be able to verify that the quantities are correct, the stationing's correct, anything with the cores that maybe it may have been ran. Our district materials staff will then look at the information that they're reviewing. And between the two entities, we will then publish that from the working drawer to the pay items drawer. Once that gets published to the pay items drawer, that should theoretically clear the contractor, the CPI, of any further responsibility for that plant report. We've had issues, I will say, that there has a lot of times been delays in getting the charting complete. Some contractors have wanted to wait till more the end of the charts, or maybe they are running the charts, but I don't know that we as a DOT are seeing them all the time. I know the discussion has been in our group that they want to run them, contractor wants to run them every day so they know where they're at. But in the same sense, we would like to see them so we know where we're at. Things that could be as simple as, well, maybe there's an incentive that we could start making payment for. Or more concerning to me would be is maybe there's a disincentive that we either need to not make a payment to the contractor or get a contract modification processed so that way we can start making the corresponding entries and not get upside down on the contract. So on a daily basis, we're going to ask for the chart to be submitted to DocExpress. Same thing into the working drawer. I realize that that's going to change. That chart is not going to be one chart and you're done like it would be for a plant report. The theory there is with the working drawer, we're able to submit another version and another version. You can have 10 days of paving and we'll just keep updating the chart and resubmitting it. So you'll always see the first one, the second one, all the way to the 10th one. Once the project is complete and we're all said and done, then the DOT will then publish that to the pay items drawer, and that will be what the final version is. But what's happening here and what we're trying to accomplish with DocExpress is having that level of transparency. There's been we talked about how we transfer information. Is it an email? Is it a text? Is it a lot of times what was done before with the plant reports would be through emails. Some people might be trying to use DocExpress, but there really wasn't a set process for that. If we do have a situation where it's a federal aid project and we're having any kind of payment concerns, I'll say, when the Federal Highway is reviewing our project, they may be asking, well, where are we with this? Why have you not paid that? Or why have you paid so much? I don't see a plant report. I don't see this. I don't see that. Where if we continually do this on a daily basis to DocExpress, they understand and have access to our working drawer and are able to see that this is the status of things and this is how we've got to the point that we're at. So a lot of the transparency is a key piece to what we're trying to deal with. So one of the things that we've, I will say from the primary side, from the DOT side, have tried to limit is a lot of naming convention. I know on the local system side, they've got a pretty extensive naming convention that they want people to use. This is our suggestion for what we're doing with the plant reports. You submit the plant report, we'd like it to be dealing with the mix type. Is it a surface mix, intermediate, base, something, and just a two-letter designation on that at the beginning. The date that we're placing it, and a report number. So as this example, so say today's what we talked about with this project, maybe this was the 5th day of placement, and it is the intermediate course. And so we use IN for intermediate, it's today's date, and then it's report 05. It is important to use 2-digit for the numbering. Like instead of 1, 2, 3, use 01, 02, 03. Because once we get all these reports into DocExpress, if there are issues and maybe something doesn't get published, maybe something is still being worked on, we can then sort it according to A to Z. And anybody that's worked with Excel very much and trying to sort things, if you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, you sort it, it's going to be 1, 10, 11, 12, and then it go to 2, 20, 21. Where if you've got the 2 digits, it's going to go 01, 02, 03, and it's going to keep things in the proper order. Even once it's all said and done, for someone to go back and audit, you're going to want to have that to where then they can, it may be in different order, but then they can sort it in that format, and that'll allow it to be put all in an order that then you can go from one report to another and not have to jump around. So another piece to it is that's what I'd say we'd like to see as a minimum. There's other things that could be added. It can be project specific. You know, our project had a parent 253, so adding the parent number at the end of it might be something that would be important if you've got an interest in, sometimes we tie projects, 3 or 4 projects together under one contract. Maybe you want to have it with a parent number after it to try to differentiate it. One of the things that we've tried to stress is there are exceptions to the rule for everything. I don't necessarily want to say that it has to be exactly this or exactly that, but I don't want to focus on an exception to the rule, making it to have to throw everything out. If you've got a situation that's a little bit unique, there's nothing magical about this naming convention. It's just something to try to help everyone be able to understand what we've got and put it in some sort of a logical order. So I don't know how many people here have dealt with DocExpress or have accounts with DocExpress. So this is what it would look like when you log in. I've not added a bunch of slides and a lot of detail as far as, you know, getting an account and getting up notifications and all that kind of stuff. That's stuff that we can go through separately, and there's other manuals that we can share with that'll help with anybody that needs that kind of direction. But this is what you'd see at the top there. You can see there's a contract number. That's typically what you'll see on our primary roads projects, and then there will be a set of drawers. There's 3, 6, and a total of 8. And on the far right there is the working, which is hard for you to see because it's so small. You can see it a little better here, that there's a working. So that's where you'll get into. And each one of the things that are highlighted or that are in blue, that's something that's a live link to where if you click on that, it'll go to another page, another drawer, to be able to work through it. So if I clicked on working, then you'd be in this working drawer. Example here, I mean, it's a blank project at this time. I just showing this for example purposes. So that's what it would look like on the very first time. And this upper right, that yellow button says submit document. So if you click on submit document, then it would come up with something to be able to fill out. I'm going to click one more here. So that's on the left. It would have been on the left of the screen. It's basically a title. This title, there's nothing other than whatever you type in there. If you mistype something, if you misspell something, that's what's going to show. It doesn't pull anything from the file that you're referencing or anything. It's whatever you type in there. So this is what I would have asked for the SU or the IN, the date, and the report number. That's what we're showing there. Then it's click and browse and find in that Excel file. That Excel file, whatever you're using for your plant report naming convention, can be whatever you want it to be, whatever suits you. It's not going to show up anywhere other than in this location here, as far as a naming convention part. And then there's a comment part. So this example we talked about where you might have multiple bid items for a mix. So this day that we've been talking about, we placed intermediate, but it also part of that intermediate was some of the shoulder. So on that, for people who were not on the project, it's difficult to know exactly what all that mix was used for. You may not know that there's 2 reports in the Excel file. So we're wanting to use the comments as a way to be able to flag to people that it's not just the intermediate item. There's also this paved shoulder item that's with this file. So that way when we're working through that, we don't overlook something. So here we are. This is what it would be once you click submit. And I realize you can't read all that. This is the working, under the working side. What I'm trying to show here is the detail that it would be shows a version 1, whatever's this file name up here is this version 1 current. You can see the comments below, and Prime 2014, that is the Prime contractor. That's just a generic thing for this example, okay? This side here, there's a couple things to point out here. One is the draft. It shows that it is something that is still in a draft form. It hasn't been accepted, it hasn't been received. We've got the ability to resubmit. That's this other button here, this other blue button. So we can resubmit. So when you go through the process, version 1 is submitted. We get into version 2 or version 3 or whatever version that you have to get to, and that's when you'd use the resubmit, and that way it goes right on top of that previous submittal, rather than having multiple submittals of basically the same report. So this here is just sort of just trying to provide a location in the flow chart of what you're looking at there. This is where the contractor uploads the plant report for first version to DocExpress, and then we would have sent now we'd send from our materials office, we'd send our data that we've tested back to the CPI, and then the CPI gets the information uploaded into the plant report and then resubmits it to DocExpress. And this is where, going back to version 2, this is what we're trying to say here, is the resubmit button is what you'd click to be able to do that submittal. This is what you'd get. You can see in the background, it's sort of a grayed out screen. That's just showing that's where you're at. But the box that opens up, that's where you would then browse for your new file. Again, you don't have to rename it because we've already named it once. You're just finding that file. If your system is that you just add the DOT's results to your file and you don't change the name, then it'll be using the same name, of the file. There's nothing magical about that. If you've got to where you're keeping different versions inside your process, then you've got that ability too. You just then select the correct one that's got those DOT results. Got the ability to add comments. If there's something that you need to comment on, you're welcome to, but not a requirement. Then just click Save, and then it goes back to your main screen, your working screen. Now this screen for version 2 looks very similar to what it was on version 1, if you just look at it from this perspective. But then when you get to the left side of that, you'll see that the naming was still the same, but now you got version 2 current. So then some of the questions that we get is, so now I don't have version 1 anymore. So what happened to that? It is still there. What's shown here, this is the right side of that same screen, but I'm showing one where the log is hidden, where the arrow is down. That's on the left. If I click on the arrow and have the arrow going up, and it's the arrow I'm referencing is this little arrow here. Those are the ones. That's the difference that I'm speaking to. Then it shows the log, and the log that you can't see it real close there, but you can see it on this one. Now you see more than one thing. You see the very first entry, version 1 oldest. You can see the comments that were made. You can see who submitted it. Now you see version 2. Now you see the prime, same thing. And you have the plant report up here as far as your naming convention. So every time you want to get into that, if you click on the main file name, you will get the latest report. If you ever need to go back to a previous report, All you have to do then is click on whatever version it is you want to go back to. And by having it say prime for 2014, that'll be, if I was on the prime contractor, it'd say Dean Herbst, contractor XYZ. And so it's going to say who submitted it, and everybody that has access within that organization will then be able to view that. We do have it. I know there has been some discussion about some concerns about proprietary information. If somebody, can somebody else see that? The only people that can see that is whoever you authorize, as far as from a contractor, subcontractor, supplier standpoint. The people internally that are for DOT and FHWA, those would be the people that would be able to see that, who need to not be sharing information unless it's accepted, allowed by the contractor. So again, this is where I'm just trying to give you an update of where we are on the flow chart. That's where the contractor uploads the next report, and then DOT starts doing our reviews. So this is where the DOT is performing our review, and we may have a little differences throughout the state to the DOT, to the contractor industry. I don't think that's going to make a big difference to you, whether the construction office does something first or whether the materials office does something first. For the DOT staff, the real issue is who gets to it first. So the inspector gets the information submitted to the CPI from the DFR. All this process gets there, and the CPI gets a second version out there. That morning, maybe the inspector doesn't get to it right away, but the district materials staff have gotten ahead of the things, and they are able to get through their piece and check what they need to check. So if they can put a comment in here that everything looks good, then the DOT inspector, the grade person, will be the one that would submit it. This example here would be more that the DOT inspector, the guy on the grade, person on the grade, was able to say the quantities and core information is correct. Now the materials person, once they get their review done, they can publish it. It really is a little bit of who's able to get things completed first and trying to be the most efficient as we possibly can. So when we do that and we add a comment, that will be there, as you can see. And now this one, I was logged in as Janet to be able to have the DOT representative. But then when we entered that information, you're able to see that comment. So all of this information, as you as a CPI or someone on the contractor side want to check on the status of it, you can see that, okay, the construction office has made their piece, now we're just waiting for the district materials to finish. Or district materials has done their piece, now we're just waiting for that inspector to get a minute to do the review. So say they said there was a problem, and we got to go back and resubmit. So then that's where we've talked about communication all along. DocExpress is really good at keeping the documents and doing some of the document management piece. And there are some abilities to have notifications and some things to where people can communicate that way. But it is not meant to be the sole way of communication. We still need to have that phone call. We still need to have that email. Whatever that works to get people to know that, hey, there's an issue with this. It can be to where we could reject it. I don't think that's really our intention, because it sort of gives the impression like it's really something more drastic than what it probably is. But having that conversation and having then a resubmittal, because there's something that's a little bit different or a little bit off. And that's something that's off could be like the DOT inspector. So we're doing the DFR. We put in begin station, end station, we put in the bid items, we do whatever, and then we get to the plant report and go, oh man, I fat fingered that. The CPI doesn't have any way of changing that. The DOT inspector has to redo the DFR, make the correction because I fat fingered one thing, resubmit it to the CPI. They can redo their submittal into the plant report and then resubmit the version 3. or version 4. Hopefully it doesn't get much more than version 3 because we're able to streamline this. Again, same process, resubmit document. You CPI, you've got the file that you've been using all along, you've got the changes made, it's resubmitted, and now you can see it's every one, version 1, version 2, version 3, current. So if you clicked on this title up here, it'll be the same as this version 3. But if you ever needed to go back to, I don't know how much this would ever happen, but if you ever needed to go back to version 2, it would always be there. It's not being erased or taken off there. So again, once we are between the DOT, once we agree that everything in the plant report is where it needs to be between the construction and materials office, then we go ahead and publish it to the pay items drawer. So then you'll see it as the pay items. And then if I go back to the working drawer, I didn't highlight this, but you can see up here, this is green, and that's actually in a word named published. So that'll tell you that at that point, that report is published and everything is good. Otherwise, the previous slides, what we showed is it was in a blue, light blue, and it said draft. So we're looking at the chart. It's the same concept. We're going to put it in there into the working drawer. We're going to use IN since it's intermediate. We're going to say chart. It's not going to be critical to use a date for this because it's going to be a recurring submittal. It isn't just down to one date. This also gives us the ability to, if we ever did not have a situation where the DOT results and the CPI didn't correlate and we have to use DOT results, we can always go back and change the appropriate day to get it to apply what it needs to be. And again, once the project's complete, once everybody agrees that everything's final, as far as the plant reports, as far as the charts, there's no issues, then we will publish that to the pay items drawer once that's complete. A lot of it is there is just trying to streamline it. We believe that by using the DFR, we're going to eliminate a lot of the errors that we've encountered when we've had to go back and have plant reports changed. And I think that's probably much all I had to say about that. I think that's the flow chart, the way we want to try to move forward, and I think now we're ready for questions.
What else besides plant reports and charts do you want in DocExpress? Recently I had someone ask me for a TAC ticket, and I don't know, how that got dropped or whatever. What else needs to be in there?
So the TAC ticket piece, that would be something that we're trying to probably deal with the materials audits part of it and just verifying that. So, there's been some difficulty with the transition to electronic. How much do we need to have from like the plant book? All of the data that we would have, all the TAC tickets, the binder tickets, the aggregate stuff that you guys collect at the plant. I will say that I don't know that we're consistent throughout the state on that. I think really we're just trying to find, a lot of times we're looking for one of those tickets to just verify that was the aggregate that was used or that was the binder that was there. If you have multiple, then we need to start dealing with probably one of each of those, but just as something as our record. We've got that our monitor is looking at as well, but I think what we're looking for is at least one copy of some of that just to show as our final record that this is what was used. Is that consistent with what you were being requested?
I didn't know if somebody was supposed to, maybe the monitor was supposed to submit that tactic. In other words, like keeping a file, available again. I didn't know. That's always something that goes in there, or just something.
It'd be preferred if the contractor side would enter that stuff and then we could receive it, then we could verify it. But that's where there's flexibility. If some certain situations, I don't want it to be where we won't help out That's one of the things that we've had a lot of difficulty with, well, that's a contractor thing, or that's a DOT thing. Well, if somebody's got the information, just get it in there and, try to work together on it. I will say another piece that I meant to bring up was we've had some concerns. We talked about the Survey 123 and being able to have, connectivity. There's been some concerns about, okay, here we're asking you to put things out onto DocExpress. Well, things were being requested to be emailed before, they were sent various ways before. We understand that that's not necessarily easy to overcome sometimes, but if there's exceptions to the rule, and I stress exceptions to the rule, it's something that can be discussed with whatever project engineer you're working with. But the intent would be to work to accomplish this to where we're able to use DocExpress and have that connectivity to the internet. Any other questions?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a couple of comments for the local side. To address your question, our naming convention specifically states who submits each document. Like materials are submitted by mostly suppliers, plant reports, of course, by the contractor and such. My second comment is when you're using dates, for our side, the year is first, then the month and the day. The reason is because if you have a multi-year contract, if you start with the month, when it sorts, you'll get a month from this year and the next year consecutively. If you put the year first, they'll be in numerical order, calendar-wise. The third thing is, Dean said that they don't use a naming convention, and that works for them. But they've only got a couple of dozen residencies. We've got 99 counties and 900 and some cities in the state of Iowa. If everybody used their own idea of what something should be named, when it goes in for audit, it's just a nightmare for the auditors. Because when they go to find a document, they'll try to put a search in as what they think it should be named, and all the documents that are that particular document won't come up. That's why we use a naming convention. So there are books in the back. Take what you need. If you need more, come and see me, and I'll get your name, and we'll get them sent to you.
Hold on, I'm coming your way.
Okay, so I guess maybe not asphalt related, but non-proportioned aggregate summaries. Would you prefer the spec says contractor responsibility, the IM says source responsibility? What do you think?
So it's a recurring question, so probably something we should clarify a little more. We typically always say contractor because our contract is with the contractor, not with the source. So it's something that would be for the project specific. We say contractor, but we don't care if it's a contractor or they delegate it to a sub or a supplier or whoever, as long as it gets put in there. The other aspect of that is materials also requires a summary yearly for some of the work that they do, and sometimes people get those two confused because they're to provide a summary for everything they did for the whole year for every project. And so that would be where I think that's to the source that needs to provide that information, because that's for them to maintain their certification as a source. I'm not sure exactly which piece you're referencing, but I think that would be off the cuff. That would be how I would be looking at that.
Well, I've seen both, where they've been able to get it from the source through like eRoss or some of these other sites or whatever. But I'm not sure if that we have necessarily a preference. I know that by spec contractor, that the contractor would be responsible by the spec, but then I know come audit time, it would be nice if it was from like Martin Marietta or one of these others.
I think the intent would be is the contractor is responsible because that's who we have the contract with. So ideally, you get to a source, they're going to have the information probably a lot more readily than the prime will. So that's where we tend to focus on the prime, and then if we don't get that information, we still have that teeth to where the prime needs to be the one that tracks that down.
I think we have time for one more comment or question. I'm going to pass the mic to Bill.
Thank you, Renee. Let's give Dean a big round of applause.